In the heart of a bustling alien city, nestled among the stars of a distant galaxy, humans were a rare and valued commodity. Among countless species that roamed the universe, the human race had always intrigued many. While their physical abilities might be average in comparison to other races, their minds, resilience, and relentless willpower had earned them respect and sometimes fear. At a corner bar in the city's underbelly, a human named Luke leaned against the cool surface of a stone table, his gaze sweeping over the diverse crowd. The air was thick with the sounds of alien chatter, a hum of languages unknown, and the occasional clink of glasses. It was a rough place where the brightest of minds could be found as easily as the most dangerous criminals. Luke was no stranger to this. He had traveled far and wide across the galaxy, exploring new planets, seeking new life, and at times escaping the dangers that came with such adventures. Luke's reputation as an intergalactic explorer had earned him respect. However, today, he wasn't here to explore the unknown. No, today, he was simply looking for something to drink and a place to unwind. What he didn't expect was to encounter someone who would challenge him in a way he had never been challenged before. She entered the room with an almost hypnotic grace. A being of immense beauty, she seemed to command the space around her as if the world itself bent to her will. Her skin was a deep shade of violet, smooth and flawless. Her eyes, glowing with a strange, almost unnatural light, swept across the room, capturing the attention of every being present. Her presence was like a storm waiting to break, and yet she moved with a calm that belied the strength she undoubtedly possessed. Luke noticed her immediately. It wasn't just her striking appearance that drew him in. It was something more, something deeper, almost primal. She walked with an air of authority, and yet there was a sadness in her expression, hidden just beneath the surface. He watched as she approached the bar, and the crowd seemed to part in reverence, almost as if they feared her. But Luke wasn't one to back down from a challenge, especially not when something intrigued him. He found himself standing, moving toward her, without even thinking. As he drew closer, he couldn't help but feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. She was no ordinary being. Luke knew that immediately, even before she spoke. Her voice, when it came, was smooth and deep, almost like a melody that seemed to vibrate through the air.
"You're human," she said, her eyes locking onto his. Luke couldn't help but smile, a bit of amusement flickering in his eyes.
"Guilty as charged," he said, his tone light, but with a hint of curiosity. She tilted her head slightly, studying him with a mixture of interest and something else, perhaps disdain. "Do you have any idea who I am?" Her words were not a question but a statement, one that carried weight, as if she expected him to know. Luke raised an eyebrow. "I'm guessing you're not just any tourist," he said, keeping his voice casual. "But I'll admit I'm not familiar with everyone who walks into a bar." The woman smiled then, but it was a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You should be careful with your words, human. The galaxy is full of dangers, and sometimes your curiosity can lead you into places that even the bravest of beings would avoid." Luke wasn't the type to be intimidated easily, and something in her words piqued his interest. There was a challenge in her tone, and Luke wasn't about to back down from it. "And what's the worst that could happen? I'm just here for a drink." Her eyes narrowed, the glow in them intensifying, and for a moment, Luke could almost feel a weight pressing down on him, as if her gaze alone had the power to crush him. She leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Touch me again, and I'll drain your blood." The words sent a chill down his spine, but Luke didn't flinch. Instead, he found himself smiling again, the thrill of the unknown running through him like a spark. He could sense her power, feel it radiating from her. But there was something else, something that intrigued him even more than the danger she posed. There was a depth to her, a hidden story that she wasn't telling. "Well, that's certainly an interesting offer," Luke said, his tone light and teasing. "But I think I'll risk it." Without waiting for her response, he placed his hand gently on her arm. For a moment, The world seemed to stop. Luke could feel the power of her presence surge, like a wave of raw energy ready to crash. But then, to his surprise, she didn't move to strike him. Instead, her eyes flashed with something that might have been shock, or perhaps something deeper. The room fell silent for a heartbeat, the tension between them palpable. Luke's hand remained where it was, and for a moment, it felt as if the entire universe was watching them. The woman stared at him, her gaze piercing, as if trying to read his very soul. "You have guts," she finally said, her voice barely more than a murmur. "But you are foolish." Luke shrugged, still smiling. "Maybe, but I've always believed in taking chances." For a long moment she said nothing, simply studying him. Then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. "I'll give you credit, human. You have a certain confidence. But don't mistake that for strength. Strength is something you'll never understand." Luke met her gaze. "Maybe not. But I've learned a thing or two in my travels, and I think we could learn a lot from each other." Her expression softened for a brief moment, and in that fleeting second, Luke saw something more than just a powerful alien who could kill him with a thought. He saw someone who was burdened, someone who had lived through pain, someone who carried a weight far heavier than what appeared on the surface. But then, just as quickly as the moment came, it was gone. She straightened, her posture becoming rigid once again. "Stay out of my way, human!" "You're playing a dangerous game." Luke chuckled softly, not one to back down. "I don't mind a little danger." Her eyes flickered, her glowing gaze sharpening. For the briefest moment, it seemed like she might take him up on his offer, but instead, she turned and walked away, her movements graceful, purposeful. Luke watched her go, a smile tugging at his lips. He had no idea what he had just gotten himself into, but something told him that this encounter was far from over. In fact, it might just be the beginning of something far more dangerous, and perhaps far more extraordinary than he could ever have imagined. As the alien woman disappeared into the crowd, Luke stood there, feeling the weight of the encounter settle over him. One thing was certain: he would be seeing her again. Luke sat quietly at the bar, staring at the drink in front of him. The glass was full, but it felt like a lifeline, something to ground him after the strange encounter. He couldn't stop thinking about her, the alien woman who had warned him, challenged him, and yet had intrigued him more than anything else. There was power in her eyes, a force so immense that it felt as though it could crush him with a single thought. But more than that, there was a vulnerability hidden beneath her tough exterior, something he was determined to uncover. He glanced around the bar, but she was gone. The space around him felt emptier, quieter, like the room had lost something vital. It wasn't just her beauty that had drawn him in, but the mystery of who she was. Why had she said what she did? "Touch me again, and I'll drain your blood." The words echoed in his mind, and he knew they weren't just a threat. They were a warning, a reminder that she wasn't like any other being he'd encountered. Her power was beyond anything he could understand, but that was exactly what made her so fascinating. Luke didn't consider himself a fool. He knew what it meant to be caught in a dangerous situation. He'd been in enough of them to recognize when the stakes were high, but there was something different about her, something that made him feel like maybe, just maybe, he could survive whatever came next. His thoughts were interrupted when a voice spoke behind him. "You seem deep in thought, human." He turned to find her standing there, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light of the bar. Her presence seemed to fill the space, making the air feel charged with energy. She hadn't moved, but it was as if she had simply appeared out of nowhere. She was even more beautiful up close, her violet skin shimmering under the soft lights. Yet there was no mistaking the danger she radiated. "I didn't expect to see you again so soon," Luke said, his voice calm, though his heart was racing. He had hoped she might have forgotten about him, but deep down, he knew that wouldn't be the case. There was something about their first meeting that had been far too intense to be easily forgotten. She looked at him for a long moment before speaking.
"You're not as wise as I thought. I warned you before."
"You should have stayed away," Luke shrugged. "I don't listen to warnings." "Not unless I know exactly what's at stake." Her eyes narrowed, the glow in them flickering with a flash of irritation. "Do you think you can handle what's at stake? You have no idea what you're dealing with." The challenge in her voice wasn't lost on him. He had to admit, she was unlike anyone he had ever met. But there was a part of him that wanted to understand her, wanted to know what lay beneath the surface. What was the secret she was hiding? What was the power that made her so dangerous? "I think I have a pretty good idea," Luke said, leaning forward slightly. "But I also know when something is worth fighting for." She didn't move, but he could see the slight change in her expression. For a brief moment, there was a flicker of something soft, maybe even uncertain. But it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by the cold, distant gaze he had seen when she first walked into the bar. "You're making a mistake," she said, her voice quieter now, almost as if she were talking to herself. "But if you truly want to understand, I can show you. But be warned, once you step down this path, there's no turning back." Luke didn't hesitate. "I'm not afraid of what's ahead." "I never have been." With that, she stepped closer, and for the first time Luke felt the full weight of her presence. It wasn't just her strength that made her so formidable. It was the sheer power that seemed to radiate from her being. He could feel it in the air, a crackling tension that made it hard to breathe. He knew she wasn't just talking about physical strength. There was something deeper, something far more dangerous at play. She raised a hand, and for the first time, Luke noticed the faint glow surrounding her fingertips. It was subtle, but unmistakable. He could feel the power in the air, humming and vibrating, as if it were alive. "You think you're ready?" she asked, her eyes locking with his. "Then let's see if you can survive what comes next." Before he could respond, her hand shot out, and he felt a jolt of energy course through him. It wasn't like anything he had ever experienced before. The energy was cold, sharp, and it cut through him like a blade. But it wasn't painful. It was overwhelming. His vision blurred for a second, and he could feel his heart racing as if it were trying to escape from his chest. He staggered back, trying to steady himself. What had just happened? The energy had come from her, but it didn't feel like a physical attack. It was as if she had reached into his very soul, probing, searching. He could feel her thoughts pressing against his mind, pushing him to the brink of madness. "You're strong," she said, her voice oddly distant. "But you're not invincible. You're still just a human." Luke shook his head, trying to clear the fog in his mind. It felt like she had been inside him, reading his every thought, his every fear. The experience left him feeling exposed, vulnerable. "I'm not invincible," he muttered, his voice barely a whisper. "But I don't give up. Not now. Not ever." She stepped back, giving him some space. For a moment, they stood in silence, and Luke could feel the tension between them, thick and unrelenting. He wasn't sure what she wanted from him, whether it was to break him, to test him, or something else entirely. But whatever it was, he wasn't about to back down. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. The woman looked at him, her gaze unreadable. "I don't want anything from you. But I need something from you. And if you're willing to give it, then maybe, just maybe, you'll understand what I've been trying to tell you." Luke's heart skipped a beat. "What is it? What do you need?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned her gaze toward the door of the bar, where a new group of alien mercenaries had just entered. Her expression hardened, and the air around her seemed to grow colder.
"Not here?" she said, her voice low and serious.
"Come with me. We'll talk somewhere safe." Luke didn't hesitate. He followed her as she led him out of the bar and into the alleyway outside. The noise of the city faded behind them, replaced by the eerie silence of the night. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, but he didn't back away. He was too deep now, too far into this strange connection they had. They walked for several minutes until they reached a small building on the outskirts of the city. It was quiet here, away from the chaos of the bar and the dangers that lurked in the heart of the city. The woman led him inside, and as soon as the door shut behind them, the tension in the air seemed to ease, if only slightly. She turned to him then, her expression softening for the first time since they had met. "I need your help," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "And if you choose to help me, it will change everything. Not just for me, but for you as well." Luke studied her carefully, trying to read the truth in her words. There was something in her eyes now, something raw and desperate. He could feel the weight of her plea, the sense that she had been carrying something heavy for a long time. He didn't fully understand what it was, but he knew he couldn't walk away now. "What's at stake?" Luke asked, his voice steady. The woman took a deep breath, her eyes locking onto his.
"My people are dying, and the only way to save them is through a bond that you and I must share."
Luke stood in the dimly lit room, his mind racing as the woman's words echoed in his head. "My people are dying, and the only way to save them is through a bond that you and I must share." The weight of her words hung heavy in the air, the silence between them growing thick and heavy. He wasn't sure what kind of bond she was talking about, but he could feel the gravity of the situation. Something important, something world-altering was happening right in front of him. He glanced at her, trying to read her face. The expression she wore was not the cold, detached one he had seen when they first met. No, this was different. There was a kind of desperation in her eyes, a vulnerability that she had tried to hide behind her intimidating demeanor. But now, it was clear. She was asking for something more than just help. She was asking for trust. "Why me?" Luke asked, his voice steady but filled with curiosity. "Why me? Out of all the beings in the galaxy, do you need me?" The woman hesitated, her gaze flickering as if she were choosing her words carefully. "Because you are human," she said softly. "You don't understand the power you hold. The power your kind possesses. We, the ones like me, have powers beyond what you can imagine. But we cannot do this alone."
"You must be a part of it, or we will all be lost." Luke's brow furrowed.
"I still don't understand. What kind of power are we talking about?" The woman stepped closer, her presence filling the room.
"It's not just a physical power," she explained. "It's something deeper."
"Something spiritual. My people, we have a connection to the universe, a connection to the very energy that flows through all living things. But we've lost that connection. We've been cursed, for lack of a better word. And unless we restore what was taken from us, we will cease to exist." Luke could feel his heart racing. There was a part of him that wanted to run, to escape from this impossible situation, but there was another part of him, something deep inside, that couldn't pull away. He had been in countless life-threatening situations, faced dangers that would make any sane person run in the opposite direction. But this felt different. This was more than just a fight for survival. This was about something much bigger. "Okay," Luke said, taking a deep breath. "I'm listening, but I need you to explain it to me. All of it. What exactly do you want me to do?" She didn't speak right away, but instead she turned and walked toward a nearby table. On it were several ancient-looking scrolls and strange artifacts that Luke couldn't even begin to understand. She picked up one of the scrolls and unrolled it carefully, revealing intricate symbols and drawings that seemed to pulse with a strange energy. "This is the key," she said quietly, her fingers tracing the symbols on the scroll. "This is the bond we need to form. But it's not a simple thing. It requires more than just your presence. It requires your willingness to give up something. something important. It's a bond that can never be undone, and once it's made, it will change both of us, forever. Luke looked at the scroll, feeling a sense of awe and fear growing within him.
What do you mean by give up something? What's the cost of this bond?
The woman looked at him then, her eyes filled with something that Luke couldn't quite place, regret perhaps, or sorrow. The cost is your freedom. The bond we must form is not just between our bodies, it's between our souls.
I can't force you to do this. You must choose.
If you agree, we will be linked forever. And once that bond is formed, it will be impossible to break. We will share not only our power, but also our pain, our memories, and our very being. Luke felt a cold shiver run down his spine. The weight of her words hit him like a punch to the gut. He had been in many dangerous situations, faced enemies with weapons and armies, but nothing had ever felt as heavy as this. To be linked to another being, to share his very soul with hers, it was a terrifying thought. And yet, there was something inside of him that said it was the only way forward.
You say, I have to give up my freedom, Luke said.
But what does that mean? How would this bond change me? It means, the woman replied, her voice quiet but firm, that your will no longer be solely your own.
We will share thoughts, emotions, and experiences. You will feel everything I feel, and I will feel everything you feel.
You will see the world through my eyes, and I will see it through yours. It's not a simple connection. It's an exchange, a merging of souls. Luke ran a hand through his hair, trying to process everything. He had always prided himself on his independence, his ability to think for himself and make his own decisions. But this was different. To share his soul with another being was beyond anything he could have ever imagined. And what happens if I say no? Luke asked. What if I walk away? The woman's gaze softened, but there was a sadness in her eyes. If you refuse, my people will die, and you will never truly understand the power you could have had. The choice is yours, but I cannot do this alone. Luke stood there, the weight of her words pressing down on him. He could feel the conflict inside himself, torn between his own desires and the knowledge that his decision could change the fate of an entire species. He had always been a man who embraced challenges, but this was beyond anything he had ever faced. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Luke spoke. What do I have to do? The woman's eyes widened slightly, and for the first time he saw a flicker of hope in them. You are willing to do it? I'm not sure what I'm getting into, Luke said, his voice steady, but I'm willing to try. She nodded, and her expression softened. Then we will begin. You must come to the center of the room. Luke moved cautiously, his eyes never leaving her as she led him to a circle marked on the floor. It was etched with symbols similar to those on the scroll, each one glowing faintly with an inner light. The air in the room seemed to grow colder as he stepped into the circle, and he could feel the energy around him shift. Close your eyes, she instructed. Focus on your breath. Let go of everything. Your fears, your doubts.
You must be fully open for this to work.
Luke did as she asked, his heart pounding in his chest as he tried to calm his mind. The sound of his breathing filled his ears, and he focused on the sensation of the floor beneath him, the cool air on his skin. Slowly, the world around him seemed to fade, until all that remained was the strange, pulsing energy that surrounded him. And then, he felt it, her presence. It was as if she was inside him, her thoughts mingling with his. It wasn't just a physical sensation. It was something deeper, a connection that went beyond the body. He could feel her emotions, her fear, her hope. He could feel the weight of her pain, the burden of her people's suffering. And in that moment, he knew that this was real, that they were truly becoming one. The energy between them surged, and for a moment, it felt as if the very fabric of the universe was stretching, pulling and bending around them. Luke's body tingled with the power of it, and he felt a deep, soul-shaking connection to her. Her thoughts were now his, and his were hers. As the energy swirled around them, Luke's mind began to flood with visions, flashes of her life, her memories. He saw the destruction of her world, the loss of her people, and the desperate hope that had driven her to seek him out. He felt the weight of her responsibility, the crushing burden of being the last of her kind, and the terrifying knowledge that her people's survival rested on this bond. He could feel the weight of her heartache, the loneliness that had haunted her for centuries, and in that moment, he understood. He understood why she had sought him out, why she had brought him here. It was not just about survival. It was about hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, they could save her people, and in the process, change the course of history. As the energy swirled around them, the connection deepened, and Luke felt a part of himself begin to fade, his own identity becoming intertwined with hers. There was no turning back now. The bond had been formed, and with it, something had changed, something deep and powerful, something that could never be undone. The room was still, the air thick with energy as Luke stood there, feeling the weight of the bond that had just been formed. It wasn't just physical, this connection. It was deeper, more profound than anything he had ever experienced. For a brief moment, he wasn't sure if he was still himself, if he still knew where he ended and she began. But slowly, as the sensation faded, he regained control of his own thoughts. The flood of memories, emotions, and experiences that had rushed through him moments before now felt distant, like fading echoes, and yet he could still feel her presence lingering just beneath the surface of his own mind, like a shadow that never quite went away. Her thoughts were now part of his, her pain, her hopes, her fears, all woven into the very fabric of his being. It was strange, unsettling, but there was also something deeply comforting about it. He looked at her. No, not at her, with her. It was as if he could see the world through her eyes now, the way her violet skin shimmered under the dim light, the way her posture was always so graceful, as if she were both an ancient queen and a warrior in one. And yet, despite the beauty that surrounded her, there was a sadness in her eyes. It was a sadness that Luke could feel in his own heart now, like a deep ache that wouldn't go away. "You feel it too, don't you?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with a strange sense of certainty. Luke nodded slowly, not trusting his voice just yet. He didn't have to speak to know what she meant. He had felt the rush of her memories, the weight of her pain, and the fear of losing everything that mattered to her. He had agreed to this bond, and now it was clear that there was no going back. What she had offered wasn't just a way to save her people, it was a chance for both of them to change, to connect in a way that transcended everything they had known. But the question remained, was it worth the price? "What happens now?" Luke finally asked, his voice steady, though his heart was still racing. "We're connected now. But what does that mean for us? For you? The woman?" No. They looked at him with a kind of sorrowful resolve in her eyes. "It means that I'm no longer alone," she said softly. "It means that you're a part of me now, and I'm a part of you. But it also means that the fate of my people rests in our hands, together." Luke took a deep breath, the weight of her words sinking in. He had known that this was more than just a connection. It wasn't just about saving her people, about saving her. It was about saving both of them. But now that he understood the true cost, the true depth of what he had agreed to, he realized that it wasn't just about her people anymore. It was about him, too. "What if we fail?" Luke asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. "What if I can't handle this?" "What if we can't save your people?" Her gaze softened as she stepped closer to him, the bond between them humming with a quiet intensity. "We won't fail," she said, her voice filled with quiet determination, Because now that we're connected, we share everything. I have your strength, your courage, and you have mine. We are no longer just two separate beings. We are one. The truth of her words settled in Luke's chest like a heavy stone. They were no longer individuals, not in the way they once were. Their fates, their very lives, were intertwined. It wasn't just a bond of power, it was a bond of heart and soul. But what did that really mean? Luke looked at her, searching her eyes for any sign of doubt, but there was none. She was resolute, unshaken by the gravity of their situation. And for the first time since this journey had begun, Luke found a small flicker of hope growing within him. He had never been one to give up, not in the face of danger. And not now. What do we do now? Luke asked, his voice more certain than he had felt in the past few hours. She gave him a small, almost imperceptible smile. Now we begin the final step. We go to the heart of my people's home, the place where our power was stolen. If we can restore what was lost, we will give my people a chance to survive. But if we fail, then everything will be lost. My people will fade away into nothing. Luke nodded, the gravity of the task ahead pressing down on him. But he wasn't afraid anymore. He had been afraid when he first met her, when he first felt the weight of her warning. But now, with the bond between them, he knew that fear was not something they had time for. Let's do it, he said firmly. Without another word, they turned and left the room. The city was quiet outside, the stars twinkling above them like silent witnesses to the unfolding events. Luke could feel the pull of the bond, the invisible thread between them that connected their every thought, every emotion. It was strange, but not as overwhelming as it had been at first. Instead, it felt natural. It felt like a part of him. They walked through the quiet streets, past buildings that seemed to lean in on them. Watching them with unseen eyes, Luke could feel the weight of the mission ahead. It was a journey into the heart of the unknown, into a place where not even the bravest explorers had dared to go. But as he walked beside her, he knew that this wasn't just her fight, it was his too. The journey to the heart of her people's home was long and treacherous. It took them through dense forests and across barren deserts, over mountains that seemed to stretch up forever into the sky. But every step they took, Luke could feel the connection between them growing stronger. He could sense her fears, her hopes, her memories, and he realized that he was beginning to understand her in a way he had never understood anyone before. They finally reached the heart of her people's home, an ancient temple hidden deep within the mountains. The air around them was thick with an otherworldly energy, and Luke could feel the power pulsing in the very ground beneath his feet. "This is it," the woman said, her voice low and filled with awe. "This is where it all began, where my people's power was stolen." Luke took a deep breath and stepped forward, feeling the bond between them tighten like a rope around his chest. He knew that this was the moment that would either save them or destroy everything. As they entered the temple, Luke could feel the presence of something ancient and powerful. The walls were covered in intricate carvings, each one telling the story of her people's rise and fall. The energy in the air was almost suffocating, and Luke could feel his heart racing as he approached the center of the temple. There, in the center of the room, was a pedestal, surrounded by strange symbols that glowed with a faint light. The woman stepped forward, her hand outstretched toward the pedestal. "This is where the power was taken," she whispered. "This is where we must restore what was lost."
Luke stepped forward and placed his hand on hers, the connection between them deepening as they both focused on the pedestal.
The air around them began to hum with power, the energy building, crackling in the space between them. And then, in a flash, the energy surged. Luke felt the bond between them reach its peak, the power flowing through him and into her, and vice versa. It was a feeling unlike anything he had ever experienced, a feeling of unity, of shared strength, of a future that was uncertain but filled with potential. The room seemed to glow with light, the symbols on the walls shifting and rearranging, forming new patterns, as if the very fabric of reality was being rewritten. And in that moment, Luke knew that they had done it. They had restored the power that had been lost. As the light faded, Luke and the woman stood together, their bond stronger than ever. They had saved her people. They had saved each other. And in the end, that was all that mattered.